Hey everyone, it is October 14th, 2022. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Welcome to another Open Cluster Management Community Meetings. Today on the agenda, we're gonna go over the 0.9 release, which is scheduled for the end of next week, or the Friday of next week, October 21st. I guess we can go through all the issues. Oh, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we can go through all the issues. Sorry, did you want to say something? Okay, so the first issue, it's marked as done already. This one is on the placement condition. Okay. Li Yang and Quinn Hao, anything that you want to talk about, or it's just done?
I think we have already finished this one.
Okay. So I'm moving on to the next one. So this one, I think it's about moving up the API version.
It's also done, actually.
Okay. And then the cluster set binding. I guess this one's also move up the version. We move the alpha version.
Yeah, the change has been merged.
Add-on customization. This one is also marked as done as well. So, oh, I'm actually interested in talking a little bit about this one. Qzheng, so I see the enhancement is merging, but is the actual code changes in the add-on framework now for the configuration?
Yeah, it's also merged. I think the only missing part is we haven't finished the document about how to use it.
Okay, I got it. Thank you. Okay, these are all done. Support to communicate between hub and the managed clustering proxy environment.
I think this hasn't been finished. It's part of the requirement from the DAN on the so to avoid to find another registration mechanism instead of the CSR. So these are related. We haven't found we haven't even started it yet. So may need some time later to have more discussion.
Okay, thank you. So this one is about the support for the spread policy. Is this the one the presentation last one was on, or this one's different?
Yeah, this is related to the presentation from the last meeting. Haoqing, do you want to talk about it and what's our plan in the next step?
It seems Haoxing is not in his meeting.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, we have an enhancement and the API PR push from that the summer program student. So it cannot be done in this in 0.9, but the next plan is that we can finish the proposal and finish the API, and then the implementation will. He has a reference implementation, but we still need to take a look at it and maybe to do some refactoring on that. So
I see. Thank you.
yeah. So the first step is to finish the proposal and the API change.
Yep. So on this one, improve the user scenario. So we see a lot of these have been checked already, but there's still a little bit more on the workload, storage, disaster recovery, and the cluster maintenance. Is CleanHell on? Could you talk a little bit about this one?
I think she's not here, but I will check with her on whether the other two scenario can be need to be deferred or anything can be done in next week.
Okay, thank you. Support access not only queue servers but other services in the managed service. I'm not familiar with this one.
So Federal is
Yeah.
Federal. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this one can be done on time, but as we discussed before, it will have two gaps. One is the HTTP security skip issue, and the other one is the service domain issue. But that won't block this feature to release, I think. Yeah.
Maybe
Thank
you
you.
can also briefly introduce what is it about?
The details of the issue?
No, I mean what function it achieved in this story.
This story will support will allow the cluster proxy add-on to support user from hub to access any specified service on the managed cluster. So before it will only allow the access the kube API server.
Wow, it sounds like a pretty useful feature. Thank you. Moving on. So that one will probably be done for this release. Moving on to this one, I think this one's owned by Min Kim. Allowed the work agent to run on a different identity. I don't think he's on right now. Qjiang, do you know the status for this one?
Yeah, I'm working on this, and I think most of the tasks are finished, and the functionality is working, but there still remains a performance test. I'm doing now, so yeah, I think the functionality is working, but the performance testing result. I'm not sure if I can improve the performance. Maybe in next release.
I see. But the feature is ready to be released for this release, right? It's already merged in, right? The code changes.
Yeah, all code
Okay.
changes was merged.
Thank you. I think this one I think we had a community meeting that talked about this one. I think
we already submitted most of the PR for this release, and we will try to merge it today or next Monday. I think it will be included to this release.
Thank you. Okay, the last one is about the ArgoCD integration pool model. So today, I'll talk a little bit about it. So today we actually presented at the ArgoCD developer experience community meetings. So the summary is they didn't really like our suggestion, but they provided a really good feedback on what we can do. So I think within 1 week, we can follow their feedback and come up with something that we can push into our upstream. Um, since Josh, you're here, do you want to talk a little bit about it? Like, what do you think about now that we had our discussion about their proposal? Do you want to still continue with our old idea of modifying the AppSec controller, or you want to follow their suggestion a little bit?
Well, you know me, I like the path of least resistance. I mean, if we press forward on our original approach, you know, it's obviously going to cause a conflict that we'd have to overcome with that community. So, I mean, as we discussed today, we think what they propose or the approach they proposed, we think we can make that mostly work. It doesn't change a lot of code on their side or our core code, which is nice, and it just allows us to add to their sandbox, their project, the lab project section, and they have stuff in release that's in that project space. So I think, I mean, as we discussed, I think we want to try a few things, and if we can mock it up and see if it works, it definitely seems like an approach. And if you guys want, we could talk through a little bit what the suggestion there was.
Yeah, I would love to spend some time talking about what their suggestion is. But let me ask if there are any other topics that we want to cover before I move to this what they suggested for the pool model. Qjang, do you have anything that you wanna go over, as well as Yuan Yuan?
No, for me, it's just because we don't we have a proposal in the community to separate the release cadence between add-on and the core piece. So I think for this part, it doesn't need to be really aligned with 0.9 release. It could be have a it could have a separated release cycle. So so don't worry about that.
Oh, but I think what happened is we're drafting the blog post for the CNCF, and then in the in the blog post, one of the main feature was this pool model, but I don't think the amount of work we can probably get it done like based on the suggestions. So yeah, I'm not too worried. The due date is next Friday. This should give us enough time to do it. Josh, what do you think? Do you think it's doable?
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, I think it is. It's, you know, in essence, it's just transferring what we had in the original plan to its own controller, and a lot of the pieces we leave the same. So, I mean, in theory, and especially, you know, we were fiddling around with it during the call to make sure things like the annotation you'll describe in a second, you know, worked. That I think you're right. I think we should be able to put something together before Friday, which will let you record something for the CNCF.
Yep. So I guess yep, we'll target the Friday due date for sure. In fact, I think it was even less involved because before in our code changes in the AppSec controller, we also have to play with the generators to make sure, you know, skip validation on something and then make sure it auto generator works. But in this approach that they describe, you know, we can leave all those code untouched, and then we're just taking the results of the application set. So which makes it a lot easier actually. So okay, before I keep going with the ArgoCD application discussion, any other open cluster management topic you want to discuss? Yuan Yuan, Qjang?
Not from my side. Thank Mike for helping me cover this topic.
Oh, no problem at all. Okay, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what the community feedback is. So I think in one of our Open Cluster Management Community meeting, we shared our plan of introducing a optional pull mechanism for application set. So in ArgoCD application set, when a user generate application set, the application set itself generates a bunch of applications, and the application is applied directly on the primary server, the primary cluster or the hub clusters, and then each application points to a remote cluster, and then that's how they apply the resources. So our initial proposal to the community was we'll modify the application set controller so that instead of creating the application, it'll create the OCM manifest work CR, wrapping each application CR. And then everything just behaves like how Open Cluster Management works from the hub spoke pattern and the pull model. Each cluster will pull the application CR, and then based on their agent ArgoCD application controller, will reconcile and deploy the resource that way. So when we presented to the community, they didn't like the fact that we're making changes to the ArgoCD application set. They don't like the fact that we're importing a Open Cluster Management API, which seems a little bit odd because it's not providing any other functionalities besides this application set controller code changes part. And they don't like the behavior change of the changing the application set. It's not intuitive enough for them that now the application set is not generating the application, but instead some external OCM API object. So we discussed the proposal, and they went over the fact that, okay, so it seems like the main goal of this proposal is to generate applications. To generate manifest work that's wrapping the application. So what they suggested is that we don't make any changes to application set controller. Instead, we'll create some new controllers that ArgoCD doesn't have to know about. So it'll be some completely new controllers. One of the controller will watch for the OCM managed clusters, and then it will create the ArgoCD cluster secrets. So why this is needed is because when an application set tries to generate application, if we have the managed clusters, but we don't have these ArgoCD secret type clusters, then it's not going to generate the application correctly. It'll say, oh, you don't have that cluster, so we're not going to generate that application for you. So with what their suggestion is, we create a controller that can sort of import the managed cluster into something that the ArgoCD can understand. So we'll take for example, we'll take the managed cluster and then convert it to sort of like a dummy secrets. As long as it has this cluster label, secret type cluster label, ArgoCD will understand it as a cluster that we can generate application into from the application set. So now with the managed cluster imported, the application set can now generate the application. So when in the application set, there's a template spec, and the template spec basically means this is the application that it should be generated. So I'm not sure if they recommend it, but what we're thinking of is we add an annotation here for us so that we can pick out these are the application that are meant for the pull model instead of the push model. So so in this case, the application set with this template of application with this annotation and the destination of cluster name will generate an application that looks something like this. So with the and then the destination cluster one. So with this application created on the hub or the primary cluster, they suggested that we have another controller to watch for the application that gets generated. Then and then that controller wraps the application, and then we might need to do additional modification inside this application. But then essentially we wrap it in a manifest work and to put it in the managed cluster namespace on the hub cluster. So and then the rest of the part we don't need any changes, which is just how manifest work behaves. The managed cluster pulls down the application to the managed cluster, and then reconcile that way. So they also said, if we follow their recommendation, once we have something that we presented and discussed, we can submit a ecosystem project proposal, and then it'll if it's approved, then we'll get added to the Argo Project Labs organization. And they said this Argo Project Labs doesn't mean incubating or experimenting. It's just another location that is more for the ArgoCD extension. So some of the items here are not necessarily incubating or experimenting, but it's actually in production use. For example, the ArgoCD operator. So we have an internal talk regarding some of the advantages of doing this. And the advantages, obviously, we don't need to change any Argos CD APIs and controller. Like we're in control of our own code, and we can make the changes on our controllers. And then it behaves almost the exact same way as our current channel application subscription model. And I said the proposal is actually suggested by the ArgoCD community, so it's highly likely that will go through, and then we get our space on the Argo Project Labs organization. But some of the disadvantages is the application set will generate the applications, and those applications, because they're pointing at a dummy cluster, so a dummy secret with the cluster that has, the ArgoCD cannot point to, because this just came from the managed cluster, from the open cluster management registration. So those applications will always have like an error. So we sort of need them to provide a way to either skip the application reconcile entirely or pause the application, because ideally we will also want to update the status on the application. And if we update the status of the application, we don't want the ArgoCD application controller to overwrite our status updates. So that is basically what we have. I know it's a lot to go through. That's what we currently have based on their feedback. Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about it? Qiu-Zhang, any comments?
So in this we still need to change a little bit on their code, right? So to honor the pool model annotation, and I'm not quite sure about the destination field. Is that a new added field or it's an existing field?
Is there existing field? So the destination on an application, if they have destination, for example, cluster 1, if it's a actual cluster that you added through ArgoCD, then it will have, the proper credential to connect to cluster one and apply the resource that way.
Yeah,
But in
we'll
our
be able
case,
to. Oh, sorry. Go, Mike.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go. It's fine.
Yes. But in our case, we just converted from the managed cluster to sort of like a dummy secret, so that sort of like trick the application set into generate the application successfully, right? So it's not going to connect to the remote cluster, but what this does, it gives us the new controller, tell the new controller, hey, when you wrap this application in manifest work, put it in the cluster one namespace, and then we will probably change the payload a little bit so that it'll apply correctly when it lands on the remote or the managed cluster. Sorry,
Right.
go
When
ahead.
we turn it into a payload, you'll have to change that to like local cluster. I think they call it local host or something like that. And there'll be a few other things. But like as Mike was showing here too, like we can within the template, we can drop the annotation under so that we can do the identifier. But you're right, Chojen, the change we'll have to make is actually around ignoring, is if whatever annotation we can agree on with them, it's that they don't reconcile the app object as well, so that we can modify the status with our controller. But I mean, to me, that's so Mike actually found, is that actually the issue there? Mike found an issue that somebody had already opened to do pretty much just this. So I think we could just finish that. I mean, it shouldn't be too difficult to make that change.
Okay, so if they don't reconcile at all, does it mean that our own controller will also maintain the status of that application?
That's right. So the original plan had us manufacturing a manifest work with a bunch of status references on it to pull the data off of the application anyways. So our controller that created the manifest work will just read the status references and keep the application in sync, the application status in sync. And what we still have it to do to find out is if we fill those in, how broken is Argo's UI? And then we'll need, if Argo's UI isn't broken, then that's perfect. If Argo's UI is broken, then we might have to put a similar change for the controller that reconciles application that skips it, for the UI to ignore it as well.
I see.
But those are two smaller changes, so hopefully there'll be more. And because we're playing the game and following along in their suggestion, which makes it, I mean, this all makes sense. It's a good suggestion, and it does nicely separate the code, as Mike said as well, so that OCM has its bits that it can change and modify as it needs to, and it doesn't affect the system proper or Argo proper, which is good as well.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think so for them, the only thing that we need from them is a way that they can tell the application set don't reconcile, and there will be some other engine help you to maintain that.
Right. Well, it's the application though. The application set engine we leave to reconcile normally, because it's what creates the applications, and then we look at the application. We do a watch on application, wrap it, set it off in manifest work, which is perfect.
Yeah, I think it might be a bigger scope than this issue, because I think this issue just says stop the sync, but it doesn't mean stop it from reconciling, right? So it might.
No, you're right.
Yeah, so when you stop the sync, they might just say update the status, say pause, or for example, but doesn't mean give up control over the application. I think it might be kind of tough to ask them to provide something like that. But I was gonna ping I think it was Alexander. I think the moderator of the meeting, and who suggested this idea to begin with, tomorrow. I was gonna ping him earlier, but then I looked at the time; it was close to 5 p.m. and I don't want to ping him when he's about to leave work. So I'm gonna ping him tomorrow and ask how do we deal with. I guess the biggest problem, Josh, correct me if wrong. Right now, is just stop the reconciling on application, hand the control over to us so we can update the status. As long as we update the status, we assume that the Argo CD UI is gonna show up fine, right?
Yeah, no,
Okay,
I agree.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's basically it for this proposal. And then, yeah, we're gonna aim for it. Even if we don't, we'll probably, we probably can't have the application pause by next Friday. But I think we can probably come up with the two controllers by next Friday. That's the plan. And that's it for this topic. Any other feedback? Qzheng, Josh, anyone?
No, that sounds great to me for the ArgoCD part.
Yeah, I think they.
We could share that with I'm not sure if Jimmy is here or because they were interested in the integration with Argo also. Maybe we could share the doc with them. Maybe they can also put some feedback.
Okay, I will put it in a public place and then share the doc. I think it's a great idea, and I like how welcoming the Argo CD community is to our to enhance this propagation part. So it seems like it's gonna go through and be onboarded into the Argo project lab, which will be great. Because in that project, it's highly coupled with open cluster management. So I think like we can do a bit of advertising on the open cluster management there as well on the on the Argo space, which is great. Yep, that's all I have. Is there anything else anyone want to cover for this community meeting? If not, thank you all for coming. Take care.